Like most Avatar: The Last Airbender fans, I read those headlines that the sexism had been cut out all over YouTube, and I went,
what?
So I immediately rushed over to the article where this quote came from, and then I eye-rolled myself for believing the tabloids, essentially. First of all, it's the kid actors who say this, and they are very much kids. They seem really sweet, really fun, and they don't articulate what I believe they were trying to articulate very clearly, but they do drop the keywords that tell me what the truth is. First of all, they do say toned down. They are toning down the sexism, not cutting it out. They said they're redirecting some of that need for change in Sokka elsewhere. Not all of it, just some of it. And their reasons for doing this were that it didn't play out well in live action. So I'm a developmental editor, and one of my jobs is to understand and articulate why certain changes should be made. And so I'm gonna try to explain why I think that this toning down Sokka's sexism thing is actually a good thing. And believe me, I am not an apologist for poor choices in adaptations. If you want proof, go and look at my Shadow and Bone reviews and definitely my Wheel of Time reviews. So we're going to look at Sokka's sexism just briefly here and talk about the need for change in the live action. Animation is a caricature of real life. Everything is bigger, more extreme, and acceptable because we accept that this is an animation. It is meant to be a caricature of what we would see in real life. When you adapt animation into live action, you bring it down, tone it down to what it is meant to represent. An example of this being done well, or well in my opinion, would be Luffy in One Piece, what we saw in the anime translated to the live action. In the first episode, we see Luffy punch Kobe in the head, almost knocking him out. And it's not meant as a bullying gesture. He does it again later off camera, claiming that he punched him because he wants to. And a couple episodes after that, Luffy physically beats the crap out of Kobe in order to help him join the Marines. Now, we know what this is supposed to be. This is Luffy's way of helping Kobe to sort of ground himself. When Kobe is spiraling in negative thoughts or hopelessness and totally losing himself, Luffy punches him to bring him back to his senses, to bring him back to the present, to break that cycle. It's a bit of a gruff method of grounding, but it works, and it's meant in kindness. In the live action, if Luffy punched Kobe, it simply wouldn't come across as feeling organic. It would feel cartoonish. It would feel as awkward as a lot of those moments between Winry and Edward in the live action version of Full Metal Alchemist. So what the live action did instead is have Luffy slap Kobe once across the face, just once in the entire series. And it was a gentle slap, just meant to do what it was meant to do, to break his cycle of negative thought and bring him back to the present. Doing this instead of a full-out punch was a good choice in my opinion. It's true to Luffy's character, who uses this physical, gruff gesture to help Kobe come out of his negative thinking. And it's executed in such a way that it doesn't feel like abuse. It feels like the live-action representation of what the anime was a caricature of. Another thing to keep in mind is the pacing of animation meant for children. Children's animation is abbreviated. It doesn't let moments linger and breathe or explore subjects too deeply. It touches on them and moves on. It takes logical steps, but just the highlights. If the same pacing was followed in live action, it would feel like an abbreviated story. It would kind of feel like what we got in the M. Night Shyamalan movie, where important turns and events were described in exposition. So getting back to Sokka and his sexism being toned down. To start, let's consider the change that had to be made in One Piece when adapting the anime into a live action. Luffy gently slapping Kobe instead of punching him almost unconscious is the perfect example of the kind of changes we're gonna see that need to be made even in Avatar: The Last Airbender. So Sokka starts out as cliche sexist as you can get. He literally says at one point to Katara, just a few minutes before his conversion, that, women are good at sewing and cooking and stuff like that, and men are good at hunting and fighting, and, that's the way that it should be. Like, that's his mentality. And he says it very blatantly and without shame, just believing this is how it goes, until the Kyoshi warriors essentially flip his understanding of the world on its head. He goes into the Kyoshi warrior dojo, kind of stuck up and you guys obviously caught me off guard, and the girls kind of go, yeah, we can tell that you don't really know what you're doing, and sort of play along with him and like, oh, why don't you give us a lesson? And he's like, okay. So he tries to teach them, and in the end, they totally school him. He feels humiliated and embarrassed. He leaves, goes outside for a bit, has a think, and then comes back and is humbled. And he literally kneels on the floor, asking them to forgive his behavior and his insults, and then he says he would really like to learn from them. He recognizes that they are better warriors than he is. And then his conversion is immediate. From there, he is instantly no longer sexist. We don't see him demonstrate sexist thought patterns or behavior from that point going forward. It's a total 180. So, that is what we see in the animation. Now, imagine we're watching a live action, and in the beginning of the episode, we have that conversation with Katara where he's telling her that, you know, women are good at the sewing and the cooking and stuff like that, and men are good at hunting and fighting, and totally disregarding her, then coming in and insulting the Kyoshi warriors. Then he goes outside for just a couple minutes, comes back in, and is totally humbled and never sexist again. That's going to feel very abrupt. So here are the two things that you could have done to make it feel more organic in a live action medium. Number one, tone down Sokka's sexism so he doesn't have to change so much. It's gonna be more believable if he doesn't have to make a huge change, if it's just a tiny little thing about his mentality that needs to be flipped around. Like maybe he, just like Cow in the Water Tribe, believes that women can't be warriors, and maybe that's it. Maybe that's the extent of his sexism, at least that we see, that he doesn't think women can be warriors. And so when he is captured by the Kyoshi warriors, he's surprised and his pride is hit, and he goes in there and he's like, I know how to be a warrior too, you know, like obviously, like I'm a man, like it's in me, you know, just naturally. And they show him that that's not the case. And then he realizes he wants to be a good warrior. These are people who actually are good warriors. And so he basically presents himself to them as, I want to be a student of yours. I want to learn from you. That's not such a huge change as completely 180ing your entire view of all women and everything that they are capable of, and the separations between men and women. And again, it doesn't say that he doesn't believe these other things. It just doesn't highlight them. So that's one option. The second option is to keep him just as sexist as he was in the animation at the beginning. Have him have his encounter with the Kyoshi warriors, and that is the start of his conversion, but not the full journey of the conversion. You could have maybe several scenes after his humiliation with the Kyoshi warriors where he talks to other people, where he goes and he really thinks about it, or I don't know, something, you know, where he has a little bit more processing time and then he comes around. But even then, it might still feel a bit rushed. You might want to take the story of his conversion and have it be something that he struggles with beyond the Kyoshi warrior episodes. But if you watched the animation, there really aren't a whole lot of opportunities for that to happen. We don't see Sokka struggle with sexism after the Kyoshi warrior episode. So that's going to require quite a bit more change on the part of the writing for Sokka's character if we stretch out his conversion beyond the Kyoshi warrior episode. Also, it takes something from both Suki and Sokka. So Sokka self-reflects and then prostrates himself before Suki, saying, I want to learn from you because you are a warrior and I am not. That shows a great deal of humility and ability to not self-start, there's a word for this, but essentially he's wise enough to be able to look at his own flaws and change himself of his own accord without needing somebody else to come in and say, you need to change. Even though he had prompts of this from both Katara and Suki in this episode, it's really from within that he makes this choice out of his pit of humility. I want to change. That if you take that away from him by having other people influencing more than just Suki, his want to change, it does take something from him. And also from Suki, quite obviously, she makes such an impact on Sokka that it becomes a bond between the two of them, that she is part of Sokka's growth in this respect. So yeah, anyway, now is it going to be less satisfying in the live action to not see Sokka go through this major change? Well, it's gonna feel less, yes, because he's going through less change. However, it's going to feel more organic. It's going to feel more natural, more believable. It's going to feel like this is how this would be if it was in real life, if it's done right. I have great faith that it's going to be done right because as my Discord members will know, and anybody who was paying attention to some of my more recent videos, I've been talking to a top Netflix executive who is very much involved in the Avatar: The Last Airbender adaptation and has actually contacted me after this Sokka sexism news broke to tell me that, yes, it's not gone. It's just tabloids at this point, people blowing a tiny quote way out of proportion. And yeah, so everything that I have talked about with this executive shows that their hearts and intentions are in the right place. They want to do it faithfully. And the hardest thing is going to be making changes that are necessary for live action to work and feel good, like good entertainment, and not disappoint the fans. That's going to be the hardest challenge. And for me, if it's done right and done well with very few disappointments, I would consider it a success. But that's it. I just wanted to address that small thing. Take it as you will. You can come back and check out my other videos in the Avatar: The Last Airbender series. I've got lots more that are planned to come out before February 22nd, and be good to yourself.